you have not watched 28 Years Later from Danny Boyle from last year, perhaps the premise of this direct sequel will be spoilery for you, so go catch the earlier film before proceeding. Spike, disillusioned by the actions of his father Jamie, has left the colony on the Lindisfarne Island and set out on his own journey. While he was hunted down by the rage virus infected, Spike was rescued by Sir Lord Jimmy Crystal and his gang known as the Fingers. In this initiation in the dilapidated indoor ice skating rink, Lord Jimmy demanded Spike to defeat one of his minions known as Jimmy Shite. Our young hero, who was more comfortable with bow and arrows, could not deal with the physical manhandling and the verbal abuses from Shite. When the push turned into a shove, Spike found the exact moment to stick the dagger, and in the first disturbing visual of this movie, a crucial artery was severed and Shite was losing blood profusely. At this moment, you realize that Lord Jimmy had little regards to his minions, and it was the survival of the fittest at its most ruthless. The Fingers' reign of terror continued when they came into a cottage which housed some survivors, including Tom and Kathy. Like what we have been inculcated with the Walking Dead series, the obnoxious nature of the humankind, when governance and law is non-existent, would rear its head. Those fake leaders would treat human lives as dispensable. However, certain member of Lord Jimmy's gang was starting to grow seeds of doubt with their leader, his method of handling things, and whether he was a spawn of the devil as he claimed, with the devil being referred as Old Nick. Dr. Kelson continued amassing his memento mori to the victims of the rage virus. In a strange twist of fate, he built a rapport with the alpha he named Samson we had seen in the earlier film. After the events of the prequel, Samson would approach Kelson's towers of bones with aggression and ill intent, to the extent that the doctor had to incapacitate the infected with his medical knowledge. This led to a moment of tenderness and weird companionship in the midst of the calcified remains of many likely victims Samson had uprooted the spinal cord from. This continual interaction also stirred some psychological change within the Alpha Rage monster. For the first time in the franchise, audience could see what thoughts were swirling within an infected. This gentle moment shared between Kelson and Samson was spotted by one of the Fingers and brought the attention to Lord Jimmy, prompting the leader making tall claims that Kelson was indeed Old Nick. This led to the climactic showdown, which is supposed to be an amicable one, with Kelson helping to spice up Lord Jimmy's cock and bull story until he spotted Spike and plans went off the script. There was no doubt Bone Temple was a straight continuation of 28 Years Later. There was no attempt of a recap or guiding audience through what was transpiring from the previous movie. Audiences were assumed to bear knowledge of key characters like Kelson, Spike, Crystal, and Samson. Jimmy Inc. or Kelly will be the new notable character to be acquainted with in this sequel. This served as a useful bridge from the world building from Garland, which was a stark contrast from the onset of the spread of the rage virus to what would feel like understanding the reversal of the virus spread and taking over the human host, while bringing various characters across the timeline to achieve this salvation for the humankind. To be frank, I don't think I'm that attentive enough to differentiate the filmmaking nuance between Danny Boyle and Bone Temple's director Nia DaCosta, as well as the difference in the photography from Anthony Mantle to Sean Bobbitt. You could take away the end credits from the first movie, conjoin the two films, and you have a 3 hours plus long movie which would not feel jarring to me. There were a lot of unsavory comments seen online with how Bone Temple felt unnecessary and could sabotage the trilogy and taint the franchise. This was reflected by the underwhelming box office taking, but the movie really built up Spike as a protagonist and a newfound companionship that would be crucial for the final part, which Alex Garland had already plotted out. It may be true that the cavalcade of interesting infected introduced in the earlier movie could not be spotted here. In fact, the sparing infected actions were concentrated on a key scene with Samson, but as DaCosta stated in an interview, Bone Temple was a movie about the nature of evil, which ultimately originated from the humankind. What I loved about Bone Temple was the procedurals of Kelson's daily routine. We had seen him meticulously getting rid of the flesh and blood of the infected, and salvaging the skulls and bones for his memento mori. In this sequel, we go more in depth of how he took notes through medical journals about certain illness he had never treated before, or doing inventory check of the medicine he had managed to scavenge on his trips. He was doing all this while listening to Duran Duran on vinyl records. The rock opera theatrics at the end with Iron Maiden was enjoyable as well, proving Kelsen was a person who enjoyed his 1980s music and was keen on building relationship with either humans or infected who had time for him. Ralph Fiennes had a more prominent performance as Kelsen in this movie, and hope audiences will remember his role in this franchise at the end of the day. The other noteworthy scene for me was Samson's journey on that stranded train carriage where Spike and his mother first encountered the Alpha infected. The progression of the storyline and outcome felt like laying seeds for what to come with the infection after so many years since the spread. Jack O'Connell was at his slimy best, certainly a whole different persona from his demonic incarnation in Sinners. But the whole controversy of dressing up to look like the disgraced Jimmy Savile rubbed people in the UK the wrong way and questioned the choice of Boyle and Garland. Yet knowing the fiendish acts committed by Savile, perhaps it was a poetic choice. Reading about the fact that the probability of the production of the final 28 years movie banked on the financial success of Bone Temple, it would be a shame to rob even casual horror fan like myself the ending that Garland had intended, that would tie up the franchise with a bow. But with Garland, who was so flexible and innovative to tell his stories on different platforms, we would see it ultimately, whether it was a movie or not. I do like Bone Temple, and thought sitting through the movie was a breeze. That said, the earlier movies still hold the advantage being the first. 20 years later, Bone Temple is awarded the same rating of 7.5 out of 10. Director Nia DaCosta budding directing career began with a role as a television production assistant for productions helmed by the likes of Steven Soderbergh and Steve McQueen. With Bone Temple being her fifth feature film, DaCosta had made Sundance-type drama in Little Woods, Hedda, a film adaptation of a Norwegian stage play, and most prominently, The Marvels for MCU, a movie which was given the unfortunate tag as part of the downfall of the franchise. DaCosta had made a horror movie based on the franchise from the 1990s prior to Bone Temple in the spiritual sequel to Bernard Rowe's Candyman, with a screenplay written by DaCosta, Jordan Peele, and Win Rosenfeld, and produced by Peele's Monkey Paw Productions. The movie began with a prologue of a young boy living in the Cabrini Green housing project named William, who went to the communal laundry room for some laundry cleaning before encountering the creepy hobo by the name of Sherman, who had been suspected to hand out candies to children with razor blades hidden within. The scream from young William alarmed the police unit on patrol, and Sherman perished under the extreme violence from the police. Years later, William grown up and was still doing laundry as a profession in the same neighborhood, and he was seen talking to an artist, Anthony, who was intrigued with the urban legend of Candyman, who have haunted the people of the housing project many years ago. Anthony was struggling to come up with new art pieces for an upcoming exhibition, which would go a long way to impress a famous art critic. After talking to William and doing his own research with the stories about Candyman and the Cabrini Green neighborhood, Anthony was inspired enough to create art pieces which depicted the urban legends that sent shivers to some art gallery patrons, intriguing them at the same time. Anthony's art became a conduit to resurrect the law, and like the silly game of summoning Bloody Mary, curious people would naturally be experimenting to see if the Candyman law was legitimate. A trail of blood from his victims ensue, with Candyman come seeking more candidates for his hive. I had neither watched nor interested in catching the original movie adaptation of Clive Barker's short story, The Forbidden. That movie from 1992 had endeared with fans and reached beyond the sheer cult status, and growing up in that time period, it was one of the few horror movies that looked into the poverty and misery of urban housing project predominantly lived by the black community. The background of Candyman with Daniel Robitaille, a son of a self-made African-American businessman and a brilliant painter, who fell in love and had a child out of wedlock with the daughter of a New Orleans plantation owner, leading him to escape to Chicago, where the Cabrini Green housing project is located. The henchmen of the plantation owners finally caught up with Robertel, and he was being tortured, mutilated, before killed with extreme grief, which created a manifestation to bait on the blood and collecting souls who were black men being maligned like himself into his hive. DaCosta gave us a clear narration of this story of Robertel in the form of simple animation, which was awe-inspiring, and continuing the theme of making art for both Robertel in the 1900s and Anthony in modern time. The shadow puppet montage at the end credits, which looked into Candyman's collection of members for his hive, was equally captivating for me. Despite not watching the original Candyman movie, it was not daunting to go into the movie as the journeys of the main characters were gripping enough, and like Anthony and girlfriend Brianna, who moved into a more affluent part of the community, we were like fish out of water, trying to understand the neighborhood, the people living in it, and the law that besieged the people living there. The halty art scene was such stark contrast to the desolation and the rotting conditions of the people living in the older housing projects. Therefore, it was quite a thrill to see Candyman going indiscriminately with his kills. The part with the massacre in the high school also gave us the classic warning of heeding advice and not committing the act of kleptomancy just for the thrill of it. Yahya Abdul-Mateen in the role of Anthony was a protagonist that was not hard to empathize with, and knowing the childhood travails of Anthony from the earlier movie, as well as the body horror transformation, it cuts even deeper. Teyonah Parris, who played Monica Rambeau in the Marvels, which was a pleasant surprise for her to be reunited with Nia DaCosta in that movie after being cast for the role in an earlier production, was solid in a role as Brianna and had to endure the barrage of craziness that befallen to her boyfriend and eventually to herself. It was great to have Tony Todd reprising his signature role for one last time in a sequel that would elevate this horror franchise to a new level. Between Bone Temple and Candyman, it was evident that Nia DaCosta was comfortable working in the horror genre, genuinely telling story of both the protagonist and antagonist without indulging in gimmicky gore or unnecessary jump scares. Both films stood on its own in their own franchise and should endure with time. I'm awarding Candyman a 7.5 out of 10 as well. Did you enjoy this Nia DaCosta double bill? If so, help me by clicking the like button. Are you excited with the final film in this 28 years later trilogy, and looking forward to how Alex Garland and Danny Boyle will wrap things up satisfyingly like yours truly? Subscribe to this channel to hear how I would wax lyrical for the last movie if it was greenlit for production. Talking about telling solid stories on screen like what we saw from these DaCosta films, Haunted House Secrets was a Disney Plus series that boasted such a caliber that will hold your attention throughout its run. Someone should cut off the arm of the detestable Lord Jimmy Crystal before spreading his naked body with honey and allows the bees to sting him to death.